Dale Inman, one of the fastest pit crews in the business.
They're not changing tires. They're only adding gasoline. A very quick pit stop. What strategy?
He was a master at communications.
Dale and them just out-figured him a little bit.
He was the king of stock car racing's crew chief.
Well, I'm still excited about the race, but I don't feel the immediate pressure that used to be stowed upon you, you know what I mean? And but I feel for the crew chief today. It's altogether different, and I tell them it ain't always been this easy, but it's just a different world, but that's the way it is.
People forget where racing came from. It wasn't always about the drivers, because every driver had to have, even back in the day when it started, he may have been the driving force behind the team. He may have been the guy footing the bill. He may have been the guy pushing to get the cars built and things like that. I'm talking way, way back. But he always had a buddy. He always had a guy that was with him through thick and thin, trying to help him build that car to make it go faster.
From NASCAR's earliest days, that guy has been called the crew chief. And as the sport is transformed, the role of the crew chief has become more specialized.
41, good lap.
The simplest way to explain an old-style crew chief, it's like being with your mother. Okay, you just do what she says, and you assume she knows everything to do. From wake-up calls, to getting the guys up at night, to making sure the guys were in bed at night, to making sure everybody was going to dinner on time, to hotel rooms, to rental cars.
He worked on the car, he pitted the car, he took the car to the racetrack, he made the decisions of how to pit the car, and then he talked to the driver about what they needed to do to the car. Now the crew chiefs don't even get their hands dirty.
You don't have to know how to build an engine or know how to build a race car these days. You could be a manager, put the right people in the right places, call the right shots, you know.
But pit this time, pit this time.
Now you're more of a facilitator, administrator, with a lot of car knowledge to back it up.
Do it, bud. Get back in that rhythm we had in happy hour yesterday, bud. That was a really nice race pace we had. You can do it.
I could probably be a crew chief now, just walk around and have all my people in the right place. How's the things going, guys? And then just go on about your business, let them handle it.
As the sport's grown and gotten bigger, you know, you're more in the day-to-day operations business.
You've got to be a head coach, you've got to be an engineer, you have to be a rocket scientist, and you got to be a psychologist, all rolled into one.
It may be a little less technical now than it was, but it's exactly where Dale Inman was 35 years ago.
35 years ago, the NASCAR landscape seemed like a foreign land. But it was a land ruled by the 43 car of Petty Enterprises, with a king behind the wheel and Dale Inman running the show.
He was Richard Petty's best friend. He was Richard Petty's cousin. And he was the king of stock car racing's crew chief.
Dale's friend, brother, uncle, surrogate father, boss, teacher. He's everything, all rolled into one person for me.
Dale Inman was kind of like a legend or a hero to me. Dale was a great tire changer. Dale was probably one of the best tire changers in the business.
He was the prototype of what you need to be a successful crew chief.
When you grew up, you wanted to be like Dale Inman.
He was just such a great leader, and he was able to put the right people in the right place, and you know, everybody respected him.
If you find somebody that doesn't like Dale Inman, something's wrong with that person.
If he ever grabs your arm or shakes your hand, you're in trouble.
You know, you walk up to shake hands with him, and while you're shaking hands, he'll grab your arm and bring you to your knees.
What you making fun of me?
He's always been kind of a show-off, okay, from the standpoint that, you know, when he walks up, he'll grab your hand and try to squeeze it, or he'll hit you on the arm like that.
This man's crippled more people than a car wreck.
He's always grabbing your arm and pinching it and putting a bruise on your arm or knocking you in the shoulder.
Guys, this is Dale Inman, and he was the crew chief for Richard Petty for most of all the 200 races that he won.
There's a nerve right there on your arm that you can get, and I can always find that spot pretty good. But that was just my way of, I guess, being friendly, if you want to.
And that's just his way of saying hello. You know, I like you. You know what I mean? I mean, he don't do that to people he don't like or don't know.
And he's a lot older than I am. Yeah, he's got kids older than I am.
It meant a lot to us young folks to get pinched or get thumped in the head or get hollered at from across the garage area, because that meant Dale was noticing you. It was important for Dale to notice you.
People forget that Dale was with more than just Richard Petty. They don't understand that he won a championship with Terry Labonte.
You know, everybody talks about Richard Petty winning 7 championships, Earnhardt won 7, but he's won 8. You know, so that kind of sets him apart.
One of the greatest crew chiefs of all time.
As we look at what we used to do and how we used to do, I mean, you know, Dale used to be the crew chief, but he changed tires, he drove the truck to the racetrack, then he worked on the car at home. So it was a smaller group doing the same thing. And the cars were just as complicated. I mean, you know, the whole thing is, you know, getting 4 tires to stick to the track and outrunning everybody. And so the theme's still the same. It's just so much dadgum technology and stuff now that we didn't know what technology was. We still don't, as far as that's concerned. Before you get to mine, that's where I was raised, but in between the 2 houses, it's gone, but I was born in that house. So when I lay down at night, I'm about 100 yards from where I was born. So
Really?
Yeah, not in the hospital where I was born. So,
Not like being at home, though, is it?
It's nothing like being at home.
For all his life, Dale Inman's home has been the Piedmont region of North Carolina.
Here in Level Cross, you know, as of right now, we got 1 stoplight, and Level Cross has grown some, but not greatly. Me being involved in racing certainly wasn't planned. I think it's one of them things where it just happened.
Dale's career in NASCAR happened because he happened to live just down the road from his cousins, the Pettys.
I think we're second cousins on my mother's side. We grew up together in the same community. He lived about a quarter mile down the road. He's really my second brother. My mother and his mother were real close friends, and we visited them a lot. They visited us, and you know, we'd get out in the front yard and play ball with a rag because we didn't have a ball. Okay, whatever, you know. And then we got a little bit older. We got bicycles. On Sunday afternoon, we'd all get together and race bicycles out through the woods. All the stuff that kids done back then, because you didn't have TV, you didn't have radio. So we lived out in the country, so we did the country thing. We went to high school together, played ball together, double dated together, raced up and down the road against each other. Then as my dad started getting into the racing, Dale hung around with us, so naturally he rung around our shop.
Before me and Richard Maurice could play ball or go swimming or do our thing, we had to have Lee's race car ready. And the education we all got was certainly through Lee, you know what I mean? And he was a very strict professor, to say the least.
We used to pack all the wheel bearings, you know, kept the cars washed, gassed up, I guess. And as time progressed, you know, then we got into fixing the brakes, then we got into working on the engine, we got to working the transmissions. So just over a period of time, we learned to do about everything there was on the race car.
In the garage, Dale studied the nuts and bolts of race cars. When Lee took them to the track, he became a student of racing.
I guess I started going to the races with them in 1950, you know, and a lot of our early races was just Richard, Maurice, Miss Petty, and Lee going to the races. And if they were around here, and maybe if we didn't spend but one night, I would go with them too. It was just a family affair. When we went and raced, we just kindly stayed in our little section with the car and run the race, hooked the car up to the family car or whatever we had to tow with, and brought it home. It's hard for people to realize that that's the way the sport was back then. Working on the race car, you wasn't the local hero or anything. I don't know where you wasn't shined upon as they are today, you know. There was a little bit of bootlegging going on all around this area, and they might have been shined on better than what the race car drivers were.
Learning from a 3-time champion taught Dale how to prepare like one. So when Richard was ready to drive, Dale was ready to be his crew chief.
Richard didn't get to drive till he was 21 years old, because that was the rule with NASCAR then, and he just jumped in a race car and went.
The very first race I ever ran, we went to Columbia, South Carolina, in, I guess, July of 1958. Dale and myself and another boy went with us. And that was the pit crew. That was the whole deal, buddy. I had never been around a racetrack at all. So, you know, Dale stuffs me in the car and gets me all set up.
So they turned me loose.
Real slick race, and we got down there, and Joe Weatherly didn't have a ride, so you know, we didn't know where Richard could run 200 laps or not on dirt or anything like that. So Joe was standing by, you know, just in case. 2 or 3 different times during the race, and the signal for a driver relief back then was, you know, going to your head, you know. 2 or 3 times Richard went to his head, and I'd go get Joe. He'd put his helmet on, these little golf gloves, and Richard'd shake it off. You know. Coming home, I said, "What the devil was you doing?" He said his head was itching now. Him trying to scratch his head through a helmet. So you see what I had to work with all these years.
He said, "We got a driver here. He ain't got a clue what's going on."
When the race is over, I look over at Dale and I said, "You know, I might like this driving." We were learning kind of the ropes at that time, and for some unearthly reason, most of it worked.
I'm good, thank you. Who's that?
Casey Mears.
See, I'm gonna write mine where you can read it.
I appreciate that.
Who you pulling for today?
Tony Stork.
Who?
Tony Stork.
Can I get you next to Richard Petty there?
Richard who?
Yeah. The man. You guys have been together a long time.
Yeah, and he said he'd won a lot of races, hadn't been for me.
By the early 60s, Richard Petty was growing into a contender, helping Dale Inman turn his life in racing into his livelihood.
About 1963, I guess, was the first time that there was really enough money outside the family to pay me. So I went several years where it was just, if you want to call it a hobby or what, I don't know what it was, but I guess it was more or less a passion.
It was a long time where Dale kind of run the show, but nobody called him a crew chief. So, you know, I don't know how many years Dale was a crew chief before they ever put crew chief beside his name.
I always used to laugh about it. I always say he's been a crew chief since he was 8 years old, when they were racing bikes and doing stuff like that. As my Uncle Maurice and Dale and the King grew up, one became a driver, one became an engine builder, and one became a crew chief. And it just seems like that's the way it should be. I've never heard them speak of ever a time when they sat down and said, "This is your job, this is my job, this is it." It's like 4 guys that love music, but they're all brothers and cousins, and next thing you know, they got a band. You know what I mean? Now, how did you get to be the bass player and how did you get to be the drummer? It just kind of evolved that way.
You know, Lee might have let me drove if I'd asked, but I never did ask. I just couldn't see myself tearing up somebody's car, you know what I mean? And, you know, in the early days, Richard tore up a lot of cars.
In those early years, the king was not yet the king. Richard and Dale had been taught to prepare like champions. Now, they had to learn how to win.
We started with nothing. We didn't have any engineers to tell us what to do. You just learn by how, this is what's in front of you guys. Learn what to do and how to make it work.
In 1964, Petty Enterprises received a new kind of racing engine from their manufacturer in Detroit. The Chrysler Hemi was the tool they needed to win. But first, they had to learn how to use it.
The Plymouths and Dodges have special engines, hemispherical combustion chamber jobs, putting out over 500 horsepower.
Richard went out and run as fast as we'd ever run. He come in about white as a ghost. He said, we got to work on this thing.
At that time, all the cars had bench seats in them, and you just had the seat belt in it. I go down in the corner and turn that thing. Was running so fast, the G-force, I couldn't turn the car. And I'm hanging on to the steering wheel, the reason I can't turn it. So I'd have to let off the gas to get it around the corner.
He said, well, I'm out from under the steering wheel. I'm over here, you know. And so we took two befores and put them together and wrapped them with an army blanket and then bolted them through the side of just the back of a bench seat, you know. And he laid on that, and he said that was the big thing that helped him, and we wound up winning the race, which was big, you know.
And Petty is still turning laps at a better than 170 miles an hour, so he hasn't let off the gas one single bit. He wants to win this race and win it big. And there's the checkered flag for Richard Petty, the winner of the 6th annual Daytona 500.
You know, Richard won 7 Daytona 500s, and we could always say if you win the first race, you got a chance to win them all, you know what I mean?
In 1967, they didn't win them all, but they came pretty close.
Richard Petty wins the Southern 500.
We just hit. I mean, we won a race, then we went home, worked on the car, went back and won the second race. That's great. Then all of a sudden you win 5, and you win 6, you win 7, 8, 9, 10 races in a row.
Petty Blue flies under the checkered flag, winner.
And you know, the sad part about during all that, while it was happening and everything, I knew we was going to lose someday, and that, I mean, it hurt. I don't know. I just knew that we wasn't going to win forever.
They didn't win forever, but they set a mark that would stand the test of time. 27 wins in 48 races. A championship season for the ages.
There were days when they knew they had everybody beat. They didn't even unload the toolboxes. They were in people's heads then like nobody's ever been today.
Petty's won more races in one season than any other driver in NASCAR history.
We're not trying to set any records as far as who can win the most races or have that many in a row. It's just the next one that's the most important. The next race is the most important race of our life. And he was really, really good keeping everybody motivated and headed in that direction.
We probably didn't have time to get caught up in it because we knew while we was at the racetrack, when we come in, there was no days off. We went right to work on the race car, and we had to turn it around, and we done every bit of that with one race car. We had it down to a pretty good science, we thought, from one track to another, and different size tracks and stuff like that. And of course, Richard was probably in his prime of years in racing, and
that was the way it's supposed to be. I mean, that was our plan, was that every race we went to try to win it. And at the time that we started, Dale had to feel something of what I was feeling. In other words, It's one of them deals where we communicated without communicating because we were that close and we thought about the same things and all that. So I was 50% of it as far as driving the car, and he was the other 50% that made the call in where to change tires, when to stop, what to do, and all that stuff. So when it really came down to the whole deal, it was strictly a team effort, which is, I guess it's still a team effort. But back then it was probably more of a team effort because you didn't have the communications and all that we have today.
So how the hell you actually win a race here? You won plenty of them, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's a different world today. I know that. Yeah, Richard was awful good here. You know, it's hard on equipment here. But Richard understood his equipment. You know what I mean? And there'll be some brake fade here, won't it, today?
By the time it's over, we'll
Y'all do good, man. Be careful. Yeah. We'll just have to wait and see, won't we? But I'll guarantee you there'll be a winner.
Throughout the 60s and 70s, Petty Enterprises was the dominant team in NASCAR. A threat to win in any given race on any type of track.
The late 60s up until about 78, you know, it was good times for Petty Enterprises here out of Level Cross.
Petty Blue flies under the checkered flag, winner.
That was a time when you went to the racetrack that you expected to bring home a trophy. We were winning races with Pete Hamilton, with Buddy Baker. The King was driving. I mean, it was incredible.
So it's a happy crew along pit road with the Petty name on their back.
At one time, this was kind of the place, you know what I mean?
And it was the kind of place where young men looking to break into the sport looked to catch the eye of Dale Inman, to become his pupil. Lesson 1. Opportunity was all about timing.
There's been some very successful people in the sport, still in it, that's come through here, you know what I mean? And I guess the way it was, if we needed somebody at the particular time that they showed up, that's kind of the way we hired them.
Us younger folks at Petty Enterprises always looked to Dale. He was a fantastic teacher. I always remember when the weather turned cold, he'd get on us for not having sweatshirts or jackets. He was like the big brother you didn't have.
He treated them like kids, but they didn't. I don't think they felt like that. They felt like that this was somebody that was really looking at their best interest.
Dale was just one of those people. He always had a saying like my dad, if you're 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. Dale is always early.
Race shop opened at 7. Dale was always there about 6:45. And he was always the last guy to leave in the afternoon.
I tried to lead by example, you know what I mean, and I wasn't scared to work and everything. Our main goal was to make the race car better, and that's what we thrived on.
His greatest strength was his leadership ability, and is able to take people with multiple personalities in multiple areas and bring them all to one common goal.
A lot of guys in that position are really don't want to hire anybody that they feel like could threaten them as far as their job goes. And Dale had never had that. Dale realized that he needed to surround himself with the best people that he could.
As long as I've been around, I probably didn't learn as much about the race car as I should have, but I always was lucky enough to have pretty good people that I could point them where they needed to be, and there was so much I couldn't do, I'm gonna be honest with you. but we had good people that I knowed where they was good in their area, and that's where I would put them. As far as being a good welder, I wasn't. As far as a good engine man, I wasn't. But I think me and Richard communicated real good to understand what it took for him to be where he wanted to be. I think that was my strong asset.
Me and we grew up together. We were close all through the years, and then when we did start racing together and stuff, it was all kind of like having one brain and two bodies. Okay, in other words, if I just sort of thought, hey, this car is a little bit loose, somehow or another Dale realized that.
Dale Inman, the crew chief there, has been talking to Petty quite a bit.
His communication skills made it work, and it made it work with us here with 6 or 7 people working on the car. So you kind of had to shuffle them around, sort of like leading sheep around, but he didn't make them feel like sheep.
But Dale had a leadership style that made others flock to him.
When you worked at Petty Enterprises, there was a right way to do things, the wrong way to do things, and the Petty way of doing things.
There's an awful lot of really good racing mechanics came through Petty Enterprises and were taught almost by osmosis from Dale Inman.
They taught us how to work on cars and do it proper. And part of that was, they always said to us, you don't always win the race, but you better look good in defeat.
It was how you carried yourself. It was how you had confidence but weren't cocky. How you were frustrated with things but didn't get angry. And that was all taught by Dale Inman.
It's how you approach getting the car ready to get to the racetrack as part of winning the race. It's not running a coil on a car for 6 races in a row. It's replacing it after 2 or 3. It's those little things that would put you out.
It was the attention to detail. It was about all the mechanics of the cars being perfect. I mean, when these cars rolled out of the shop, loaded on the trailers, head to the track, they were perfect.
We used to put the dashes in the car with just a flathead screw, and we would have to go back and turn all the slots the same way so that they were straight across or either straight up and down, so it was all uniform. So when you start worrying about which way a screw's turned on a dash in a car, then you're paying attention to detail. When you did it at the time, you thought, this is the worst place in the world to work. My God, they're driving us like slaves. And you look back on it and you think, it was a lot of fun.
I don't know that I would have been as successful as I was, or my team was, without Dale being the leader per se. And then on the other hand, we kind of pick on each other that if I'd had a good crew chief, I could have probably won twice as many races.
He tells that all the time.
Maybe I believe him. And he says if he'd had a good driver, he could have won more. So it's sort of in between. But that's the closeness that we have, that we can do that without bothering anything.
Darn is hard to pass here.
Yeah,
Track position, lucky dogs, and I think the cars have got so much power they're tearing at the rear tires, you know what I mean? Do you see them tires?
Yeah. A lot of those left rears looking clean.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get better in a race. Let's see.
Look at this one.
Dale's greatest strength as a crew chief was observation. Okay, he observed what everybody else was doing, especially during a race or even before a race. He knew where the competition was.
He'd come around, and talk to you and then try to find out what gear you're running. When he'd find out what you was running, then you say, well, what are you running? Well, he's gone, which is what he's supposed to do. But
the Petty crew displayed typically cool pit work and strategy.
He was a strategist before there was such thing as strategy. 2 tires, 4 tires, let's gas and go. And the other pit crew would be looking at Inman to say, okay, they're going to change 4. And just as the cars would stop on pit road, and the other pit crew would run around the car. Inman guys would gas and go, and that car's sitting on a jack, and then you drive off and you're 100 seconds ahead. I can't tell you how many races Richard Petty won, not because he was the fastest car, but because Dale Inman made the right call in the pits.
There's probably not a lot of documentation of the things that went on, but I think when you look at their 1981 Daytona 500, it was really a cool move.
In 81, we had a Buick and a bunch of Pontiacs, they had Chevrolets, and Bobby Allison come with a Le Mans Pontiac, which is different than everybody else's. Anyhow, he wound up being the quickest car.
Once again, Bobby Allison goes down the inside and zips into first place.
He had that Le Mans, and it was slick, you know what I mean, compared to the rest of them. And all day long we drafted with him. And there was about 5 of us that was hanging on to him, and he was setting the pace.
We come down to the last pit stop deal.
We assume this is a regular stop for him, but this is going to be the final stop.
And he got gas and changed 2 tires. And then the next crowd, they all come in and followed suit. And Dale kept saying, stay out there, stay out there.
So help me, I told Richard about halfway through the race, I said, Richard, the tires are not giving up any and they're not wearing any. If it comes down to something at the end, bear with me.
This is where Dale was so good. He looks to see what these other people are doing, and he says, okay, how can we beat them? So he said, okay, we can't beat these guys if we come in and get tires and get gas like they do. We're still a top 4 or 5 car, but that's as good as we can do. Just as I come down pit road, Dale says, gas only. And I said, we just won the race.
Dale Inman, the crew chief on this car, directing the traffic here as they go to work on the rods. They're not changing tires. A change of pace here for the Petty crew. They're only adding gasoline and either way, a very quick pit stop. What strategy?
So it just worked out perfect that we could come in and put 1 can of gas in and got about a 7-second lead.
10 laps to go. Richard Petty's lead is decreasing.
Dale, you've had the stopwatch on every lap. What's happening?
Ned, we're running pretty good. We're pretty well holding it on. We've lost about a second to him in the last 4 or 5 laps.
He's coming up on some lap traffic.
Right
What's
now,
that?
we just picked up about a half a second on the draft car, so we got 10 laps to go. And right now we got a 9-second lead. And he lost a little ground that lap, and we gained a little bit. So there's 10 hard laps to go, Ned.
And you're going to be pretty close on gas, aren't you?
It's going to be close on gas, but we're safe on gas.
He was figuring gas mileage from drafting, and then when he got out front, he was running wide open and used more gas. And as he's coming into the trial to get the checkered flag, it ran out of gas. So it's probably another one of them things that was just kind of meant to be.
Is he running out of fuel? He's coming across the line slowly, but he takes the checkered flag.
That was a pinnacle, I think, of if anybody looks at Dale, all the years and all the figuring and stuff that he did that they didn't see, they seen it that day. It came out that day that Dale Inman won the race. Okay, I just happened to be in the race car.
Richard, you pull one up.
Yeah, Dale and them just out-figured him a little bit.
I guess from my standpoint, that was probably the most strategy that we used down there, and that was all Dale's call. Because all I was doing was sitting there running wide open, doing the best I could, and I couldn't make up any more time. So he made it up in the pits because of the call that he had.
You know, that was a pit decision that Dale made just like that to do it, you know, from his gut. And that's what I love about Dale. He always had a game plan. He always planned things out. But he had that gut feeling, instinct of what it took to be a winner every week.
The celebration continues for Richard Petty. His first cousin, who's been with him for every race but 2 in his entire career, is standing by with Ned Jerry.
Dale winning this race goes back a long way. Just what happened here today was not the total story.
We worked our rears off, Ned, to get ready for this race, and a lot of families have sacrificed because we've worked night and day to get ready.
When you say sacrifice, what do you mean?
Sometimes you have to put your family aside, it seems like, to get the car ready.
It was unreal how hard we was working all that time, and the whole time we was down there and everything, Rod Osterlin was trying to get me to come and be the crew chief for Dale and all that, and it actually took place along then. All that was very, very stressful. That was one of the biggest decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, it was tough. Me and Dale had done talk, and Dale had just been here so long and done so much that he said, okay, maybe I need to try something else.
It was the highest high and the lowest low for the King, I think, because they had won the Daytona 500 again, but he knew the guy who had been his crew chief for 30 or 40 years was going somewhere else, and that would probably be their last win together.
Trying to hurt me.
I can't hurt you. I hurt him.
Broke my sternum one time.
You know why?
He deserved it.
He smart-mouthed me.
Hit me right there so hard.
I didn't hit you hard, did I?
Pretty hard.
Did you smart-mouth me anymore?
No, that took care of those lessons. That was one of those good lessons. We've had a lot of good lessons.
In 1981, Dale Inman took his teaching expertise to owner Rod Osterland and driver Dale Earnhardt. But car number 2 failed to make the grade.
We went about 6 months, and Rod Osterland, I guess, got in financial trouble somehow and sold the team. You're talking about a low time then, you know what I mean?
There weren't a lot of naysayers, but there was a little buzz about the fact that, well, how good would he have been without his cousin driving the race car? Well, he proved it in 1984.
Terry Labonte was a driver with a personality different from Richard Petty. But Dale re-engineered the success of the 43 with Team 44.
He was a real leader, and he wasn't a hands-on guy on everything on the car, but he had really good people that he depended on, and he knew if they were doing a good job or not, and that was his strong point. And a lot of guys in that position are afraid to hire people that are that talented around them because, they're insecure about it, but Dale wasn't.
This team they just rose to occasion, and when we got down to the final stretch, the 5 or 6 races to go, we didn't have no team meetings, we didn't have nothing. They knew what they had to do, and we went out and done it, and that's the way, and we wound up winning the championship. Great years with Terry. I think the only thing me and Terry fussed about was he is a big Cowboy fan, I was a big Redskin fan.
I've still got a $5 bill that he autographed for me when the Cowboys beat the Redskins 44-14.
It meant a lot for me. It showed that there wasn't all a petty deal. He can do it on his own.
Dale Inman, he's been here before, first time in New York, up on the front stage. Congratulations, Dale.
Thank you, Billy.
Dale's a very humble person, but I'm sure when he did leave, and I know how hard it was for him, he's talked to me about it when he left Petty Enterprise to move on, and then, to 3 years later capture the championship with a whole different group of guys, and Terry Labonte, a whole different driver, and to capture that 8th championship shows just what a leader Dale was.
That validated that Dale Inman was the greatest crew chief that ever lived.
With his 8th championship in hand, Dale's place in NASCAR history was secure. He had nothing left to prove, but one thing left to do.
He went his way and done his thing. We went our way and done our thing. And then over a period of time, both of us sat down and said, we've been too much, too thin, and all this stuff, and we're getting a little bit older here. We're not doing as good. Let's just sort of get it all back together, try to enjoy the rest of our racing career together, and that's what we did. Everything just seemed to flow together. It was just easier and just felt more at home.
When Dale returned to Petty Enterprises in 1986, it wasn't about reaching victory lane. It was about the long road home to a place where racing will always be his livelihood and every racetrack will feel like a homecoming.
I still enjoy going to the races. I talk to the drivers a little bit. I talk to the crew chiefs and see what's going on.
You ready?
Yeah.
I think we're pretty good, ain't we?
Not too bad.
Be patient and get through the first little bit.
The whole thing. We got both got two good cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Big John. The King
I tell the old stories and they seem to enjoy it, you know what I mean?
You know any stories or any? I know you won a few.
I can't remember back that far.
Come on.
No, we used to run good here.
Always.
Always.
And to go through the garage even today and be respected by people that I don't even know, it makes me feel good.
He's going to run 25 laps, come in and check number 15, just listen.
I'm glad that Richard still lets me hang around with him.
You don't really see one without the other, at the racetrack. You'll notice them up on top of the hauler. There's kind of like one.
They started going to the racetrack when they were 10 or 11 years old. And, they're both in their early to mid 70s now. So for 60 some years, that's all they've done. They don't know anything else.
My son's tried to get me to hit a golf ball. I can't hit a golf ball. There's no hobby, so what would I do? And I think as long as I can go and stay active, it's going to keep me from being a couch potato.
He talks to everyone talks to him.
Right. Hey, Raj. How you doing?
You don't
come up there anymore with us guys.
If he sees something that he thinks is not like it should be, he'll bring it up.
We've got to go. Make it okay.
He's just Dale at the racetrack. That's where he's the most natural. That's where Richard enjoys having him, and I don't believe he'll be the type of guy that wakes up one morning and says, I don't want to do this anymore. I think he's going to do this forever.
You going to stay? Go home? No, I'm good. I think they'd run 120 laps. There's 140 to go.
They're just afraid to stay at home, is what it's all about. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, y'all are just afraid that you're going to miss something at the racetrack. Somebody's going to say something that you didn't hear.
It's the third time he ain't even close to the group when he knocked him out of the way.
That's their life. And that's what it says to me more than anything else. Racing was never a job to them. Racing was never a sport to them. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't anything. It was their life. It was their lifestyle. It was their life. And just because you don't ride around in circles anymore, and just because you don't turn wrenches, doesn't mean you don't love it just as deeply and as passionately as you always did. And you don't want to let it go.
When you look at Petty Enterprises and Dale Inman, and you talk about the Petty way of doing things, it's something that's lasted for decades and decades and decades.
I think Dale developed a great work ethic from early on. Probably not many people know Dale Inman's never had a drink in his life, and not one drop. And I think that when you take someone that's been that dedicated to the sport of NASCAR as long as Dale has, and as many hours as he's put into it, and for myself and so many people in this garage that he's helped get to where we're at in our careers, it all started with Dale Inman.
There's just so many people that's helped me fulfill this, you know what I mean? Without people standing behind me and believing in me and the work and the dedication that he put into it, it wouldn't happen. It just so happened that my name got to be the crew chief, and then the numbers that accumulated along with it, you know what I mean? It's been a struggling career, don't get me wrong, but it's been a long career. And I guess that's one thing that I'm most proud of, that I have seen it from the crude things that we've talked about to what it is today. It's just a lot of honors that's happened to me, and it's all of it's come through racing. We've been to a lot of places on account of racing, and it don't make us a bit better than anybody else, but we've seen a lot of stuff just on account of racing. it's been a long ride, and it's certainly had its highs and it certainly had a lot of lows, you know what I mean? So I guess that's part of life.